That means that I can reach them in any situation, whether it be a steep pitch where I'm leaning off the back or on a flat piece of trail. But who are you?
Like they know I'm Miranda.
I'm gonna talk about bars. Oh, you wanna be that far back?
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Welcome back to our channel. This is going to be the first of a multi-part series where we focus on bike setup. A lot of the time we like to tinker about as much as we like to ride, so sometimes it can get a little confusing, but we're going to start with the most basic.
Sometimes we find ourselves getting so far lost with changes that it's always good to come back to a basic setup that just feels good and gives you comfort and confidence on the trail.
And I think we see a lot of people making mistakes out on the trail. So if we can address some simple things in this beginner setup video, that kind of gives a great starting point for everyone.
Let's dive in.
So I think one of the biggest things we see on the trail with beginners is just not having their brakes set up properly. Brakes are one of the most important things on a mountain bike for a safety standpoint. They slow you down, but they also give you the confidence to go really fast. If you can't reach your brakes, you're not gonna have the confidence to do either of those things. So the first thing you gotta do is set up your brakes so you can reach them easily. So to set up your brakes where you can reach them, you're gonna want to be in your attack position where you normally ride and just be able to basically get your finger onto the brakes in any situation. That being the brake not too far down, so you're having to really roll your hand over to reach the brakes, and them not being too far away that you are reaching to grab them. For me, I like to run my lever pretty close to my handlebars. Just using the adjustment, I can dial it in and run it so maybe when they're fully engaged, it's about 1 centimeter from the bar. So whether it's a tool-free adjustment or with an Allen key, you should be able to adjust your levers so you can reach them. And then I also like to run them a little bit higher than 45 degrees. That means that I can reach them in any situation, whether it be a steep pitch where I'm leaning off the back or just on a flat piece of trail. So now that your brakes are in the right position, they kind of dictate where your hands are going to be on the handlebars, and then you have to adjust your shifter so you can also reach that without having to move your hand too much. So you don't want to have to really lift your thumb up to downshift or really reach under your handlebar to upshift. Same with the dropper post, it should just be comfortable to be able to reach it when you're riding along at any moment. So you want to put your shifter and dropper post in a position that doesn't compromise your grip when you're riding through rough terrain. So I like to run my dropper post so I don't have to really reach my thumb off the grip, because if you're reaching your thumb off the grip and you hit a bump, your hand might blow off the bar. What do you think?
Not so close,
So that's how I set up my brakes.
I'm going to show you how to set up grips.
There. But who are you?
Like they know I'm Miranda. I'm going to go over a couple small things to be mindful of when you're setting up your cockpit. Like Remi was saying, how you set your brakes to be at the best sort of angle for where you're going to ride. So I set my brakes first, and then I set my grip to work with that brake angle and position. With my ODI grips, they have a certain way you're supposed to run them. There's cushion on the top for your palm and a waffle on the bottom for adding grip on your fingers. So you have to be mindful of how your hand is actually placed onto that grip. Some grips have a hard end. If you're riding right on the end of that grip, that's going to be a hard piece of either plastic or metal digging into your hand, and that's not really ideal. So what I always do is I put my hand in place on the grip where I'm going to ride it. So that's inside this hard edge, and then from there I can rotate the grip in relation with how my brakes are set up to get the best possible hand placement. If you find that you are moving your hand further out, then maybe you need to look at getting a different grip or a wider handlebar. Remi mentioned too how to get your shifter and your seat post in the best position. With a SRAM Matchmaker, they're actually interchangeable from right to left, and that gives you an extra step of adjustment. A larger hand, you can run them towards the inside, so there's more space. A smaller hand, you can run them further out. Thanks, Miranda. Now Jesse's gonna talk about bars.
Thanks, Miranda. I'm gonna talk about bars. Alright, I just have a few pretty simple things. For me, handlebar width is something that's pretty important to get right kind of from the get-go. We definitely see a lot of people with handlebars that are too wide and kind of beginners are a little bit cumbersome on the trail, and then you're kind of getting close to trees. It's really tough to find an ideal bar width, but when you're in your kind of strongest position, you want your elbows to be about, 90 degrees bent. So if you do a push-up, this is where I'd be the strongest, and that's what it's all about, is just being in the strongest position on your bike. So for example, I have an uncut race pass handlebar here. It's 800 mils wide, which for me would be pretty wide, and it would be hard for me to kind of turn my bike without kind of compromising my body position. And I also know from experience that my hands would be very close to trees, and I would be scratching my fingers all the time by hitting trees. So I've cut my handlebars down to 740, which I know for me is kind of as narrow as I can go. That keeps kind of stability, but I have lots of range of motion to turn my handlebars. I'm not really coming close to trees, and it's a very comfortable width for me that I am very happy with. I'm 170 centimeters tall. Remi's at 760, he's 180 centimeters tall. Miranda's at 750, and she is 179 centimeters tall. So there's definitely some variances there. The taller you are, the wider your handlebars. The smaller, the narrower. There's no one size fits all. Definitely something to get right from the beginning. It'll give you a lot more confidence and kind of more agility on your bike. Next up, seat height. Another really easy thing to do is if you stand next to your bike with your bike shoes on, edge of your seat be right at your hip bone, and that's a really good starting point. Super simple to do, and then you make sure you have a good pedal stroke on your bike and you're not going to be making yourself all wonky. From there, not something you have to do every ride, but definitely having proper tire pressure. It's nothing that's too soft where you're going to hit your rim on rocks and bumps, but nothing that's too hard where you're going to kind of lose traction on soft or loose dirt. I mean, if you have a pressure gauge, great. If not, Goldilocks, not too soft, not too hard. For trail bike with a thicker casing, either downhill or whatever your tire maker has, like the Maxxis Double Down, something that's thicker can kind of go a little bit lower in tire pressure, anywhere from 20 to 25 psi on the front and the rear to be safe, so you're not hitting your rims and you're not kind of losing traction because they're too hard. If you have a downhill bike, you can probably put a little bit more in. If you have an XC bike, maybe a little bit less for some better traction. But it all depends on where you're riding and what you're riding. That's just a good starting point for an enduro or a trail bike. Obviously, suspension is a big part of a mountain bike. It's a bit too complicated to cover in this video, so we'll do a future video on that. But to start, just go to your recommended suspension settings and go from there. In future videos, we'll kind of go through that more and really dial into the science around that. But just as a basic start, those are some simple things to do and set up your bike so you're ready to go riding.
So we covered all the basics for setting up a new bike, or if you need something to kind of go back to. Stay tuned for far more bullshit.
But not your basic bullshit, some super advanced bullshit that we'll be getting to later.
Hours and hours down the rabbit hole.
Like and subscribe!
There and here.
Like and subscribe.
Keep us employed, please.